Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So for today I am going to use an old Heidi Swap, it's kind of like an album that you could buy and then decorate yourself, and I thought the back panel would make a really good base for today's project. So it's just like a thin wood, basically. I don't know what kind of wood, but it's like a thin wood. So to start with, I'm going to add some texture paste in the matte and the crackle, and I've got a couple of stencils. These are the mini stencils from Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous, and I'm going to use the regular or the matte texture paste with the wordy one. I don't know what set these are, but they come in a set of 3, and these were sort of like the more Valentine's love themed ones. So you have this wordy kind of stencil. Ignore my dog in the background. And then you also have the lacy sort of looking one, which is to the left there. And then the third one would be it's kind of like there's a whole load of hearts, and it goes from smallest to largest. So it's sort of almost like an ombre of hearts, if you like, in the third stencil. But I used these two on here because I thought this was fitting for what I was doing. And just started off with the, like I say, the matte texture paste, got that on there, and then I will start to add in some extra texture paste along the edges. Now in hindsight, I should have not been so girly about it, and I should have added more texture paste, right? More texture paste will give you more depth and dimension and obviously texture, but also more interest in the background. And I think I was just using it a little too thin. Like with these mixed media projects, this is kind of new to me, so I'm learning as I go. But I am realizing that I could actually use a lot more than I'm using at the moment, if that made any sense. So I just went around the edge on the sort of top right hand side and the bottom left. Again, in hindsight, I should have just added some texture around the whole thing. You'll see later on, it just would have looked a little bit better, I think. So this, I don't know if these are heat safe. I cannot remember if they are, but I just kind of quickly used my heat tool over the top to just get a little bit of dryness in there, so that I could then add in my lacy stencil. And so the lacy one is going to kind of go haphazardly, so I don't want lines, but it's going to go sort of in the 2 gaps that are left, basically. I'm not worried about the middle because that's where the main pieces are going to go, but I wanted some texture in the background for some interest, and also this sort of fills in those gaps using this stencil. So for this one, I'm using the crackle texture paste, and this is much thinner. It's kind of like I want to say it's almost like marshmallow in texture. It's kind of weird, but it's not fluid, but it's very much softer than the texture paste in the matte. So it works a little differently, and with the crackle, the longer you leave it, the more to air dry, the better your cracks are going to be. So again, I'm not sure if this is heat safe. I just used my heat gun as and when. Few things I've learnt on here that probably I shouldn't have. And I will put this to one side in a minute and just let it air dry completely, and that way you'll see the cracks come up really nicely. Also, where you've got thicker paste, you'll have bigger cracks, and obviously where you've got the thinner paste, you'll have much finer cracks. So I have a variety of alcohol inks and alcohol pearl inks, and my resin pieces that, if you've seen my video a few weeks ago, or whenever it was now, I've lost track of time. So I decided to try alcohol inks on them. Alcohol inks are meant to be able to be applied to things like non-porous surfaces, so things like plastics, glass, metal, that kind of thing. So I figured, well, resin is sort of like kind of like a plasticky substance. So I thought I would give this a whirl, and it got extremely messy, and you will see that. So if you don't like messy crafts, then perhaps put some gloves on. My nails were stained for weeks, but I loved this. This was so much fun. Now I have to say that using the little brush here does nothing. It basically moves that ink out the way, and that obviously isn't helpful when it comes to, you know, getting that ink on the resin piece itself. Now I also haven't prepped these pieces. If you've seen some of my previous videos with my resin pieces, you know that I had some issues with the gesso that I was using, and whether it's the gesso or whether it's what I was doing, because it's new to me, I don't know. But I decided that I wouldn't bother with the gesso. I would just see what happens. And I got to say, the more you play, the better it got, right? It works. It works really well. So I just kept adding in the colours. Eventually I was just using the nozzle of the bottles to get, like, specifically in specific areas. That's what I'm trying to say. And I used one of the pearl colours in like a it's not the mixative, it's the, I think it's called Smolder. And then I used the slate colour, which is kind of like a grey tone. I thought those would look really nice as cog or gear pieces, you know, on that sort of style. So I got the first one done, and I was quite happy with that. And then for the second one, I just kind of try to mop up, so to speak, some of the ink that was on the mat, and it sort of worked, but it obviously wasn't enough for what I want to do. So again, I did exactly the same thing, went in and just added colour, the two colours over and over, and then I will also do the other two little pieces in the top of the screen there, and get them done. So my cogs are done. I started off with the two little hearts, using one each of those other two pink. One's the shell pink, I believe, in regular distress ink, and one is the pearly pinky colour, can't remember the name of it, in the pearl alcohol ink. And I'm using this one, which is called Deception. For some reason I remembered that one, which is the red tone, which is really very red, which is nice because that's what I wanted. And then I just started playing with more and more of the this is the pearl color. Like I say, I can't remember the name of the color, I'm very sorry. I do show you that at the beginning when I was too busy talking about something else. And so I just played around with it, and the more you play with this, the better it gets. It's just so easy to use on resin pieces. I was really surprised. Like I say, it got very messy for me. You guys may have better ways of doing this without getting so messy if that's your jam, but I was happy getting into a mess. I like messy crafts. I have no issue with that. I don't care if my hands are stained for a week or two. It really doesn't bother me. But you can see it's messy. But I loved it. And the more you play with it, the better it got, right? It was so cool. So once I was happy enough that I had enough colour, and enough sort of depth of colour, because obviously the red was the main colour for the heart. This is kind of like a steampunk heart, so I forgot to say at the beginning, these moulds were made from Finnabair moulds. I love her whole line. It's so cool, and it's totally up my alley, so very much me. And I love her. She's such a lovely lady. So I just kept adding colour in until I was happy with the depth of red that I had going on there. So there's my heart. Isn't that cool? I just love it. And also the nooks and crannies will get, like, the deeper colours will sit in those crannies as well. It's just so cool. And then these are the cogs, and I just love how they turned out. They were very cool. Very, very cool. So for these little hearts, now these two little hearts, they are really cute, and they are very detailed. That there's a lot of like filigree, I don't know if that's the right word, sort of what's the word, filigree kind of detail on it. So I couldn't see it very much with the just the individual pink colour. So I decided to add some slate on there, but I really didn't like that. It just, I don't know, it didn't work for me. So the nice thing about alcohol inks is you can either add more alcohol ink and that will move the previous one out the way, and that's kind of how you get all these very cool effects. Or you can use like a blending solution and almost like wipe it clean. So while I'd added the pale pink one on, again, I kind of wiped it clean, so to speak, enough that I could then go back in and do some other cool stuff with it so that I could just get it to a colour that I was happy with. So now that those are all dry, I'm going to use some Crackle Collage Medium. And although Collage Medium is wonderful for having that almost instant stick, I think Tim calls it the what does he say, that it's sort of like, you know, if you're too indecisive about where you want to put something, you kind of don't want to use the stuff, because the idea is that once you put it in place, it should stick there. Now with paper, I found that was fantastic. It genuinely does that. You know, you have like seconds to like decide if it's in the right spot, and if it's not, well, it's stuck. And it sticks really, really well. But I found with this that it just wasn't, while it was still trying to dry, it wasn't sticking the way I was imagining it would, because I thought it would be a really good one to use for this kind of project. So in the end, I started off with the bottle, and then I went to the tub, the main tub, and just kind of used a spatula to get sort of chunks of, or blobs of, it's a technical term, blobs of the gel, the medium on there, so that I could stick them in place. Now, don't get me wrong, when this is dried, that stuff is not moving. But while I was working with it here, I found it moved too much for me, and I'm not used to that, which I guess is why I thought this would be a good one to use. I also do something in a bit, which I think may have actually added to the fact that it didn't stick the way I was imagining it. And to be fair, I'm putting like blobs on there, so it's probably quite a lot on there for it to have that effect that it naturally would, as you know, if you were using it with paper or something else. So I still love this stuff, and I also thought that the Crackle one, or crazing one, would be a good one, that if it did leak out anywhere, you would just get that crazing effect, and it would just add to the whole you know, all the texture and everything else. So I wasn't worried. So this is the thing that I did that afterwards I've now watched and thought that might not have helped things with the glue and with the medium. I don't know if they're heat safe either, so perhaps I added to the problem that I was having. But like I say, look, even putting it up like that, it was not going to go anywhere. It just wasn't solid enough when I start doing the next bit. But now that it's dry, honestly, it is not going anywhere. It will not move. It's fantastic. So I know I have it upside down at the moment. I'm just trying to make sure things are where I want them. So the next thing is to add some colour. So I decided to use some distress paint for this. I'm using Vintage Photo and Hickory Smoke. And the reason I'm using this paint, first of all, and the colour, is because the colour wave made more sense for this project. Finnabair has got a liquid acrylic, which is, I want to say, more liquidy than the distress paint, and moves differently. They're different paints altogether. And when you add the paint like I'm doing here, and then spritz it with some water, which is what's in my distress sprayer, it kind of splays out, and it just gives the most wonderful effect. But I think it's because, twofold. One is it's a completely different product, and it's possibly thinner than the distress paint, but it's also translucent, so that may have something to do with it. These but the distress paint, I have to say, I was really chuffed. They worked fantastic. And the reason I went with the distress paint also, like I say, the colour wave made more sense for this project. I now have a purple one, but I had, at the time of making this, I had the blue one of the blue liquid acrylics, which wasn't going to work for this the color waves that I had in mind for this one. So by adding a bit of paint and then spritzing with some water, or adding some water, you're now, for the background, you're now going to be able to showcase the background textures that we put on in the beginning of this video. And also using the grey and the brown, it's kind of ties in with the cogs and the gears and things like that. It just, I don't know, it just works. So this is, again, it's one of my new favourite things, and I will keep doing it, not only with the distress paint, because I think this worked really well. So try other acrylic paints that you may have, just water them down, or use, you could water them down in a little palette and then add some more water to get them to move even more on your piece, on your artwork. Or the liquid acrylics from Finnabair, obviously, are sort of made for this kind of thing. So I'm excited about all that kind of stuff. But like I say, this worked really well. I was really, really impressed and really chuffed. Also, by doing this, it will help to, you'll see like the cracks in the crackle paste. You'll see that much more as well, because that paint will just go into all those cracks and those divots and all those fun things. And I just love it. Right, so this is where problem number 2 came in. because the pieces weren't dried on yet, and I have no patience, so part of this is also patience, and I wanted to get this project done. I needed to, what I forgot to do was to actually, what I think about doing was painting the inside of the cogs. So this, if that was glued down and was completely dry, this wouldn't have moved. It wouldn't have had any issue. It would have just, I could have just played around with it. The water won't affect your alcohol pieces either, by the way. But because it was still moving around, what I should have done in hindsight is actually colour and paint the background first, then stick all the pieces on it. So there's been a lot of trial and error with this project, but it's been a lot of fun. And I do hope that you guys still give this a whirl. Mixed media, this is brand new for me. You guys have seen a few videos where I'm showcasing products and things that are new to me. It's a whole other world for me, and I love it. I really do. I just think this is so much fun. You get to be messy, you get to create some art. It can be for your home, it can be for someone else. This is actually for my husband. We have 2 anniversaries, I know. Some people think that's weird. We have 2 anniversaries, and so this was for the other anniversary, and it's, you know, it was just a nice way, just a nice piece of artwork that he can now hang in his office. So, you know, I just think mixed media is a nice way. If you love making cards, that's great. I love making cards. I'm terrible at sending them out, so I have like hundreds of them, as you guys saw in a previous video when I was reorganizing them. But, you know, it's another way. Any of this art and craft for me is a way to escape reality, and that's not because I have a crappy life. That's because I have a wonderful life, but it's because sometimes things just get a bit much, and you need that time out for yourself. And art is a fantastic way to do this. And I think for me, mixed media in particular, or art journaling, is definitely up that alley. So I really recommend doing this just for you. Don't do it to make videos like I do. Don't do it for anything else or anyone else. Just do it for you and see how much that helps you. And I really hope it does. So back to the project. I went off tangent there, like you do. I decided to just dry off some of the paint, not the glue. Drying off the paint, and so I could add some extra paint on there, because there were a couple of areas that just suddenly didn't quite look as detailed as I wanted them to. So I wanted to add a bit more paint, and also I wanted to give this thing a chance to dry more. And what I actually did in the end was the whole piece kind of came off, so I inked the background, painted the background, and then restuck it down. So what I want to do as a last sort of thing is some dry brushing. Now dry brushing is very easy to do. It did take me a little while just to get my head around it, but it's really easy. Now you start with a dry brush, hence the name, and all you do is, I'm using some gesso, and I've taken the gesso onto a paper towel on the right hand side there and wiped most of it off. You have to get the majority of it off the brush. And I know it sounds crazy, but it works, because what you don't want, you're not painting this in white, you're trying to dry brush it. So what that does is it highlights all those beautiful details that you have on those resin pieces. So that heart in the middle in particular is just, it suddenly shines in my eyes, because suddenly you can see all the veins, the capillaries, the extra bits of, you know, nail heads and screw heads, and, you know, the gears that are in the background that maybe you didn't really notice before because you're so busy alcohol inking everything within an inch of its life. But now they just highlight and they just come to life. And the same with those little hearts with all that filigree detail on it. Suddenly you can see that much better. So I just went around and did this, and on the whole thing, including the background, because even the background, if you look at the bottom left, bottom right corner, so I did go a bit heavy-handed on that lacy bit and the right hand side, the left hand side there, but on the bottom right, you can see when I go over that, it highlights all those words at the bottom, and I just think it's so cool. So you can do this on a darker project, you can do this on a lighter project. You know, some people like their mixed media to be quite pastel-y, and that's beautiful. But I am more on the darker side of things. So, but even this is just, it turned out so much better than I thought it was going to. So I really am chuffed with it. So I hope that was helpful, guys. I hope you got some hints and tips from that. As I learn, hopefully you can too. And I just want to bring a close up here so that you can see what, you know, the detail of the cracking and where the paint's seeped into, and the detail on all those resin pieces, and even just white, you know, dry brushing it, how all those bits stand out, and almost like they come to life sort of thing. And hopefully this was fun to watch. So I'm trying to get better at doing my voiceovers as well, more so than music, so hopefully this is a better tutorial for you guys. But until next time, guys, happy mixed media-ing. Bye for now.